Listen to my voice. Pretend it's An Island by Karen Jennings. This is a book that I've been anticipating for a little while. I saw a bunch of booktube videos on this that made me wet in the appetite, I guess you could say, for it. And I couldn't get it in Canada at all. Amazon doesn't carry it. No other bookstores. We pretty much, here in a small town, have Amazon, Walmart, and Indigo, which is formerly Chapters, which is kind of like Barnes & Noble or Waterstones in the UK. My library also couldn't get it in, so I ended up getting it from Book Depository, which takes a long time to get here. When the pandemic was full on, it took like 3-4 months for a book to get here. This time it only took about a month, so that was nice. An Island is about an old man who is a lighthouse keeper who dwells on an island. He's the sole occupant there. He has sort of forged a very delicate balance with himself and the ecology, with some help from a provision drop every month or so, it seems like. But otherwise, he sustains himself solely. He is sort of at peace with the land, does his job, doesn't seem like he has any real problems. He's building a wall around his little kingdom. And one day, though, he finds an immigrant who is alive. And we learn that throughout his time in this place, immigrants continually wash up but are always dead. And when he first came to the island, actually, he discovered dead bodies all over the place. So this has never really gone into very much, but it does establish that where he is, which is not specifically designated, does obviously not care about immigrants whatsoever. And furthermore, the area is apparently ruled by a dictator. When he takes in this sole survivor that he has managed to find throughout the 25 years, I think it is, as him as a lighthouse keeper out there, he finds that he is unearthing his past and upsetting the delicate balance that he has cultivated in his time there. This causes a wash of memories to overcome him, and he continually is pulled back and forth, or at least we surmise that he is, because the structure of the novel is like this, that it continues to alternate between his past, telling what has happened to him, as it is constantly alluded to in the future, and sort of shines a light on what's going on within him, even though he has sort of no outward display of what is going on. There is a lack of interiority for the most part, and then we get that characterization that we would expect through the flashbacks, essentially. We learn that he was a political prisoner for 25 years. Perhaps that's where I got the lighthouse number, actually, but whatever the case, he's been a lighthouse keeper at least that long, I believe. He's quite an old man by the time we get to it, and he's jailed when he's quite young. The dictator imprisoned a lot of people that went on a specific march, even though it was more or less semi-peaceful, and he had a decision that defined his life that occurred around the hours of the march, which led to him, as he sees it anyway, being in prison for that amount of time. And it's about sort of the interplay between the demands society has of its populace, the demands of a government on the populace, what resistance looks like, what kinds of resistance are effective against certain regimes. And I think also gender performance takes a big, maybe not center stage aspect of the novel, but it's certainly lurking there all of the time. All of his interactions with people are characterized in the way that he is not performing as a man should, basically. He's not hyper-masculine or manly. He's sort of like subservient and sees himself as cowardly. He's not as he expects himself to be, but also doesn't know how to progress to a point where he would be sort of aping the masculinity of those around him. His past is very traumatic and checkered, and we can surmise that since he works at a lighthouse, that his entire life has sort of driven him to a solitary and lonely existence, and that interplay is really interesting, and so it really makes the past and present meld together in very interesting ways, because there's natural questions that you have about a lighthouse keeper, and you know that they have a good story usually, and this is the case in this. So structurally, it's fairly straightforward. We get the back and forths, and it's structured in 4 days. And then sort of things come to a head between the future-ish or the present tense version of himself dealing with this stranger and how it kind of upsets the balance that he has cultivated, like I said. But also it shines a light on the ways in which people were putting him in similar boxes when they were dealing with him as a youth. So the immigrant that he has saved is similarly to him an immigrant, kind of, or in the sense that he was driven from his home to the city and impoverished because of it. And even in his days in the past, immigration was a very big conservative issue, probably will always be with that rhetoric. And so we have this kind of unique examination, because old Samuel, the lighthouse keeper, and present day Samuel have very different thinking, of course, characterized by what's happened. And sort of older Samuel is more conservative in looking at this immigrant in the same sort of prejudice that old people were looking at immigrants and conservatives and the dictator, etc., how they characterize immigrants in the same way, with fear and with sort of prejudice, hate, etc., and coming into a place where they're not welcome and upsetting the balance. Except that we also see, in rare moments, but profound ones sometimes, that Samuel is confronting those notions in the present day, where he thinks of something quite prejudiced about the stranger, and it's only made more difficult to confront those things that they have a language barrier. They can't communicate, and so it leads him to make some very big assumptions about the stranger in the house and what his intentions are and what it means for him as a sort of semi-enfeebled, at least in comparison to the young and like virile type stranger immigrant person who seems like young and in good shape, is how it's usually characterized in the book. So he's very worried for his own safety. He's very in his own head, which again necessitates the past stuff happening, where it feels very organic that we're diving into what happened in prison, what happened after prison, what happens in the sort of like central tension that is set up in the past, and what happens in the future. And I thought it all worked very well. It also reads very quick. The flow is fantastic. It isn't extremely literary in terms of diction, but it's well constructed. There's nothing, I think, that you could really cut out of it. It's only 180 pages or so, maybe in a little bit of change there. And it's just a very strong contender, and it addresses certain themes in a very nuanced way. However, when we get to the resolution of the tension and the end of the book, I felt that it was trying to not say something specifically, even though it was working towards saying something, which I don't need a book to be either subjective or prescriptive in what it's trying to tell me, but I do want it to follow what has come before. And what it had been, at least to me, implying in its building was that it was going to have a resolution in the sort of way that actually communicates what the author thinks about a specific theme or subject. And instead, it peppers in moments that are contradictory, and that's interesting. But again, it sort of adds up to very little or nothing. And so I didn't get too much satisfaction from that, but I appreciated most everything else about the book. So I am quite glad that I read it. I gave it 4 stars. If you read The Island, I'd like to hear your thoughts, and if you go into spoilers, mark it so people aren't surprised and spoiled. And I'd love to hear what you thought of it, what you liked, what you didn't like. I'll be trying to get more Booker Prize stuff, and it will definitely be after the Booker winner has already come about. For instance, The Fortune Men is another similar thing that I just cannot get here yet still. But the other ones I think I can. Bewilderment and The Promise, I think, have come out recently here. So I'll try to get those. I'm hoping that A Passage North wins anyway, though, because I love it. Anyway, I will talk to you next video. See you later.